But it is now my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator, Dr. Alison Gardner. She is Programme Director of the Data Science Degree Apprenticeship at Keele University. Welcome, Alison. Hello.
Thank you. Welcome. Well, welcome to you as well.
Yeah, we're all welcome. Everyone is welcome at CogX.
Yeah, it's about diversity. Yes, everyone's welcome.
It's absolutely about diversity. Really looking forward to this session. Take it away, Alison.
Thank you. Well, it's worth repeating. So welcome to this panel. If it's not diverse, it is not ethical. And our purpose today is to explore the reasons and barriers regarding developing a diverse and representative technology workforce, and crucially, to explore practical solutions. It's not a talking shop. So we have a fantastic panel who I will quickly introduce. We have Dame Wendy Hall, who is Regius Professor of Computer Science and is an Executive Director of the Web of Science Institute at the University of Southampton. Wendy was co-chair of the UK Government's Artificial Intelligence Review, a result of which I have my current job. She is the UK Government's First Skills Champion for AI and is a member of the AI Council. And in May 2020, she was appointed chair of the Ada Lovelace Institute, one of my favourite institutes, and joined the BT Technology Advisory Board in January 2021. We then have Erin Young. She is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Alan Turing Institute in the Women in Data Science and Artificial Intelligence project. And prior to that, Erin was a researcher at the Oxford Internet Institute and also at Stanford University. And Erin has authored the Turing Institute report, Where Are the Women? Mapping the Gender Job Gap in AI, which we will focus on. And finally, we have, but not least, we have Adrian Joseph, OBE. Adrian is the Managing Director of Group AI and Data Solutions at BT Group. He was also a non-executive director to the UK government, where he was on the board of the Home Office for over 4 years and is currently a NED to the People Board of the Cabinet Office. And he was previously the chair of the Race and Equality Board, and he was awarded his OBE for services to equality and diversity in business. So very quickly then, in our discussions before we had this panel, Wendy stated that the reason she particularly wanted to do this panel is because with Tabitha, as I'm sure you all know, the Office for AI and the help of the AI Council, they plan to put diversity at the very heart of the new National AI Strategy so that it permeates every aspect, but crucially, by articulating specific actions we can take in the implementation of the strategy to make a meaningful difference in terms of diversity, rather than just saying it has to be a priority, which gets us nowhere. So I would ask that listeners post their suggestions in the chat, so not just questions, but actual practical solutions you may have in the chat as you listen to the speakers and discussion. So moving first then, I shall move to Erin. So Erin, the Alan Turing Institute's report that you authored launched early this year, and it highlighted a striking scarcity of quality data on the gendered nature of data science and AI careers. In your research, could you tell us what barriers did you discover and what solutions and recommendations you came forward with?
Sure, thank you so much for the introduction. So just to give a bit of background about our Women in Data Science project. So we sit within the public policy programme at the Alan Turing Institute. We're headed up by Professor Judy Wiseman, and we conduct data science and social science research, looking through an intersectional feminist lens in order to inform concrete policy measures aimed at increasing diversity and equality in the data and AI fields. So to give a baseline to explain why what we do is important, and then I'll get on to the kinds of barriers that we face. It's estimated by the World Economic Forum that only about 22% of AI professionals in the UK are women. And a figure that really shocks me, it's also been found that only 8% of UK researchers who contribute to the leading machine learning conferences are women. And in our own project work, we found that women comprise only around 17% of participants across the online global data science platforms. So that's Data Science Central, Kaggle, OpenML, and this drops to about 8% on Stack Overflow. And now this gender deficit is something which Wendy has been discussing for decades, and we wanted to map thoroughly in our project the current participation of women in data science and AI in the UK globally in order to better understand and really get to the nitty-gritty of these headline statistics before we did anything else. And so here's where we faced the major barrier. We ran up against this problem in which we found that there's very little quality disaggregated data, particularly intersectional data, available on women and marginalized groups already working in the data science and AI field. So that's not just within the pipeline. So in order to begin to get over this barrier, we formed a data partnership, and we obtained a unique data set containing career data on individuals working in AI and data science. And it was on this data set that we published our report, Where Are the Women? Mapping the Gender Job Gap in AI. And we published on International Women's Day earlier this year. And in this report, we generally explore the gender deficit and the gendered nature of careers in data and AI. And just to give you a little glimpse, it's available on our website, but just to give you a little glimpse into what we found. In short, there is a severe lack of diversity in the data science and AI fields, and persistent structural inequality across all facets of the fields. A couple of the kind of headline findings, we found that diverging career trajectories are differentiated by gender. So we found that women are more likely to occupy jobs associated with lower status and less pay in these fields. And we also found, building on other research, we found that attrition rates of women away from the data and AI fields are much greater. And now, obviously, this is a huge issue of social, ethical, economic justice, as well as valuing diversity. But one of the main things we look at in the report is how this is closely interrelated in a feedback loop with AI biases. So this is looking at how the world is designed and by whom. Now, technology, as I'm sure we all know, is not neutral. It's not age neutral, race neutral, not gender neutral, ability neutral. It's shaped in all sorts of ways by the people who build this technology, and it reflects their history, their values, their choices. And this happens along the whole data and development pipeline, with potential for biases to seep in at every stage. And there's a wide and growing array of examples of this bias in, bias out, which you might have seen how this feedback loop further discriminates against those who are not involved in the creation and development of this technology. So, for example, a very famous one is the Amazon hiring algorithm, which discriminated against women. And then more recently, the UK passport photo checker was found to discriminate against dark-skinned women in particular. In our report, which we'll be discussing, we offer a wide number of policy recommendations. I only have 5 minutes just now, so just to touch upon a couple, we call for greater transparency from tech companies around their diversity reporting. And we also call for ethical regulatory frameworks and standards around the development and auditing of AI. We want to help ensure that we're working towards ethical outcomes in these technologies. And we've already been having a lot of positive engagement and exciting impact from this report across a variety of communities, particularly in government and industry. But I'm really looking forward to the conversation today to see how else we can supplement what we're doing in order to have tangible impact from our findings. So that was a super whistle-stop tour throughout our work, and I hope I'll be able to discuss a bit more in the panel. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a really nice taster for the session. I'll move on next to Adrian. And of course, a lack of diversity is not just an issue regarding too few women, but has a much wider problem with lack of representation from certain ethnic groups. So in addition to this, as so well highlighted by the work of Joy Bull and Winnie and Tinnik Jebru, we have an intersectional issue with particularly Black women being both underrepresented in the field and also most at risk of unfair outcomes of AI systems. So Adrian, what do you feel are the barriers to developing a diverse AI workforce, and what actions and solutions can we put forward?
Yeah, so I mean, Erin, so great the research that you've done, and there's so much more richness that I know hopefully we can all dig deeper into. But if you look at some of the numbers, and I start with the numbers, is if you look at some of the big technology companies, there was some research done by the AI Now Institute of New York University, and the numbers for women were really, really shocking, less than 15% with one of the big FANGs, of 10% with another. But then we looked at the composition of the black population, and it dropped to 2.5% and 4%. So the numbers are quite stark, and of course, we've seen many examples of this. It's quite fundamental. It's also about power. It's about how AI companies work, what products get built, who they're designed to serve, and who benefits from their development. So it's quite a critical topic. And in addition to the examples that Erin has talked about, we've seen examples of where African Americans in courtrooms are much more biased with some of the algorithmic examples. You mentioned Joy Boulami, who formed the Algorithmic Justice League, and I'm still quite shocked that in this day and age, that the most disruptive technology trend that we're going to see for the next 3 to 5 years. But the AI of big tech companies was still not able to discern whether Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey, Michelle Obama were women, right? And that had a lot to do with the color of their skin. And so, there are a number of biases that we need to think about: bias in the data, bias in the algorithms, and there are lots of techniques around governance and so on, but also bias in the individuals that are building these beautiful creatures that we need to fixate on. And of course, some of this has been accelerated in the midst of the pandemic. We've seen, the importance of data and insight become even more important, but at the same time, we've seen, people with darker skinned tones being affected more adversely by health outcomes, by job outcomes, and in policing. So, a number of things there. What are the barriers? I think there are a number of barriers. So there are barriers in terms of schooling and catching young people at the right ages. I'm told around 9 or so when some of the inventions matter. In some communities, parents will say to their kids, for example, that you can be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. Those are all brilliant professions, but the word technology, AI, data doesn't appear in those, and I think that's important as well. And then I would also say, one of the things that my AI director, who is a woman, and by the way, the first 5 candidates that I got sent were all men, and then I reached out and said, can somebody please send me some women candidates, and Zoe was the best by far, and so we've hired her. She also makes the point that the image that we project of AI can be off-putting to some women. So, it's a 24/7 thing. You got to work outside of your normal time, in your spare time, and all the rest of it, which may be a bit off-putting. And also, it's such a fast-moving area that some women may feel that, for example, that it's a bit harder, or there's a risk if you take time out, and so on. So those are some of the barriers. What can we do? Well, there are a number of M's that I fixate on. One is the metrics, show me the data. 2 is we need to have more role models. 3, we need to get comfortable having the conversation, particularly about ethnicity, right? It's a lot easier to talk about gender and sexuality and so on, but you put race on the table and people get, a little bit apprehensive, and more so. So having the conversation. Of course, mentors and sponsors really matter. Management and what I call leadership in particular, the emphasis is on us as leaders to make. We're making the hiring decisions. We're making decisions about who gets promoted, about pay and ration. So it's our responsibility. And then the last M, I think, is machine learning, right? How do we actually use some of these techniques to detect issues in terms of job descriptions that may have words of dominance and so on that may be off-putting to women? How do we help to make more diverse panels by understanding the data better? What about projecting, instead of a next best action, there's a next best question in the midst of an interview, And so those are some of the things. But I also believe that sort of widening out and thinking there are many other more skills that we need to think about in anthropology, sociology, in the arts that are relevant to AI and the ethical and diverse use of it. I guess final point I would make is, look, if it's not ethical and diverse, then it's not actually working. If we don't recognize faces of diverse populations, then the AI actually isn't working.
That's a fantastic point to finish on, and worth mentioning again. If it's not diverse, it's not ethical, and therefore it's not working. Thank you for that. And I
borrowed it from my very talented colleagues. I should just give that attribution there.
Okay, you've been in trouble. Yeah. So moving to Wendy, I know that you have frustration that despite many years, and the amount of years you've worked on this is stunning, but many years of dealing with lack of diversity in tech as an issue, we still have to discuss this in 2021, and not only to still discuss it, but there's some evidence, judging from today's discussions, that it's actually still getting worse. Why do you think this is, and how do you feel we need to change our approach to the problem?
Well, it's not just stunning that the amount of time that I've been working on this, it's really very depressing, because I wrote my first paper, I've told Erin this, and it was called Where Have All the Girls Gone? In 1987. And I haven't got time to go into the details of that, but the graphs we drew then of showing that there were no girls reading computer science universities were exactly the same shape and relative and absolute differences between the men and women as the graphs in Erin's report. It's really quite scary. And I wrote a paper about women in AI in 1988 with my colleague Jill Lovegrove, where we said we were worried, even more worried about AI, because if women aren't doing computing, then we're going to put them off doing AI, and that could be a real problem. And that was in 1988. And I find it very hard that I actually love talking tech. Right? I really enjoy talking tech. And if I was given a choice, and next year I'm going to say to Tabitha, I really want to be on a tech panel. If I was given a choice, I'd be on a tech panel, because I just get fed up with talking about this all the time, but I'm so passionate and we have to fix it. And for AI, you've heard from Erin and Adrian, I don't have to repeat what they've said so eloquently. I will repeat what you said. There are 3 points I want to make. One is we really want ideas for the new national AI strategy. We want to put diversity and AI for public good at the core of the strategy. So as you said, Alison, it impacts in every part, that it's embedded, it's impacts every part of the strategy. But how do we explicitly do that? Now, I think it was Adrian picked up on the need. We need people, it'd be great to attract people from other subjects other than maths and computer science into AI. And with our masters, conversion masters for converting people into AI so they could go and work in it, not necessarily machine learning programmers, but that was a program that came out of the AI review. A number of universities picked up on it, and it's been incredibly successful, because the scholarships that were awarded as part of that funding, 50% had to go to underrepresented groups, particularly women, people of colour, or ethnic, whatever, it was BAME, but I don't think we're allowed to use that phrase anymore, and disabled. That was the priority, and the stats are fantastic. We have, but it's the tip of the iceberg, and we've got to do much more of that. And so we've got to think about, well, how do we get, and I think both Erin and Adrian touched on this, there's going to be all sorts of jobs in AI, very exciting jobs across all sorts of different skills are required, but at the core of it at the moment, this might change over time, we need machine learning, we need programmers, and we need diversity as much as we can get in our programming workforce. Otherwise, the products they're going to produce will be biased, unfair, not accessible, not trusted, because people are biased, right? And how do we do that? We have we have this is my second point really, is how do we actually change that now? What can we put into the strategy that could make a difference now? Because of course we need programs in schools, but we can't wait for that to work its way through the system. We have to fix the problem now. And that is a huge conundrum. Right? How do we can't say to people who are running masters in machine learning programming, you've got to have 50% of your students coming from underrepresented groups. They won't fill the courses. How do we make a difference? That actually, what can we put in the strategy that will make a difference to the intake next year or the year after in these courses? And we've all got to work together. It's got to be business is the pull, universities have got to do their bit, schools have got to do their bit. I had there are people working hugely on this. I want to give a shout out to Anne-Marie in Mephidian, who in STEMETS has been working tirelessly to persuade girls to go into computing. And the scary thing is Erin's report says it's not working. Sue Black's another one. She's amazing what she does with Tech Mums, what she's doing with her 100 moments in, that rocked computer science to make what we do sexy, because it is. As I said, I love talking tech, right? It's a really it's empowering. We want to make it cool and sexy to go into this world. But there's my story, and a friend of mine, I'll tell it very quickly. A friend of mine came to me and said, I've got my 14-year-old daughter. She loves computing. She's the only girl in the computing class at her school. She wants to do computing at GCSE level, but they've put it in the option block with drama, creative arts, where all her friends are going. So the pressure is on her not to do computing. And those are these systemic problems that we have. So my final point, Adrian's already picked it up very well. I'm going to add, it's not working to the phrase, but if it's not diverse, it's not ethical. My feeling about that is we've really got to work so hard together. People are looking at AI ethics frameworks. Companies are looking at their ethics frameworks. We've got the Ada Lovelace Institute, the Turing Institute, so many people looking at ethics frameworks. My point is that exactly if you haven't got a diverse team working on your system, on your product, on whatever, then it's more likely to not be fair, it's more likely to be biased, it's more likely to be not accessible by lots of different people. And so I'm going to finish. I could say a lot more, but maybe we'll get it in questions. And I'm going to say to Tabitha, next year I'm going to do a tech talk, please.
Thank you. It is a slight concern of mine that the field of AI ethics becomes the female researchers end up being sidelined to, and that's why disaggregating the data is quite important, as per Erin's report. So just before I ask a sort of a general question, sort of a provocation for a general conversation now, I just want to just highlight one comment that's just come through to me, that when we talk about diversity and inclusion within the field, that we need to remember about disability as well, which is increasingly forgotten in my view.
I mentioned that, Alison, just to throw back, because for the MSc, in a conversion MSc, the 3 underrepresented groups they highlighted were women, people of colour and disability. I absolutely get that. So please don't think in what we're doing in the AI strategy we're forgetting that. And I know Adrian is well aware of that too. So
yes, but I just thought it was, I just possibly didn't include it in my own introduction, so I wanted to sort of self-correct on that. And you mentioned accessible as well, which I felt was important. And again, I know one student who has taken advantage of those conversion courses, and the bursary is available for that very reason. So this is impactful. So talking about the Kickstarter question then, so to go back to what we've been saying, despite decades of raising awareness and interventions regarding the lack of women in technology, I have a women's network of my own, co-founder with Ivana Bartoletti. There's been little meaningful change. And so I ask, have we been asking the wrong question? And semantics is very important to me. So in fact, Rather than asking why we have too few women in technology, should we be asking why we have too many men and what we should do about that? And I'm going to stick with the order. And Erin, I'll come to you first.
I mean, I think it's a very interesting question. I think, I mean, if I can talk about the piece of work that we're currently doing at the Turing as a way to kind of answer your question, I think that's quite a nice segue. So when we think about tech culture and specifically AI, in the literature, we often go to this kind of equation between masculinity and technical skills and technical norms. And so I think the fact that there are so many men in tech and so few women in tech, for me, kind of, I mean, there's lots of different reasons, but one of the main reasons is this kind of the culture of the tech workplace and the culture of tech in general. And to go back to what both Wendy and Adrian were saying, I think this is also a sticking point. This is one of the reasons why, you know, all this tireless work, all these amazing women and men and everyone working on this pipeline problem of getting women and marginalized groups into the pipeline, there's still this dominant tech culture, which is very off-putting towards lots of people when they're thinking about entering the workplace. And so I think that's a very roundabout way of saying, well, this is the reason that there may be more men and too few women. And one of the things we're working on at the moment in the Turing, in our project, is we're looking at diversity and inclusion in tech workplace cultures, but specifically in the online workplace. When we started doing this project, or a few months in, the pandemic happened. And so we realized we quickly had to shift what we saw as the workplace, what we saw as the tech workplace. So what we're looking at now is working on examining gendered interactions online, in the online workplace, to see if this may be the reason that women are put off from the workplace, men feel much comfortable in the workplace, the reason there's more attrition of women away from the tech workplace, specifically the AI fields, and see what's happening here. Essentially, we're trying to, and I think this is also another good way of answering your question, we're trying to take the emphasis off of women to change and off of the groups which aren't included in tech to change, and put it onto the institutions, and instead ask, what are the institutions doing? What could they do differently? Rather than, well, what could women and these groups which aren't included do differently?
That's a fantastic comment. And I will, just before I move to Adrian, just mention something from Jessie Shanahan, who said that the problems of getting underrepresented people interested in tech is creating environments where they can succeed and flourish. So that links very nicely to what you just said. So Adrian, what is your viewpoint?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, at one level, I think no, right? Because we just need a lot more people in tech and AI, right? So does it mean having less? How is less men going to help us, right? But then, the intent of the question is, of course, much bigger than that. And you think, well, echo chambers, and you think, to Erin's very good point, it's not about changing the woman, right? And I was thinking about when I was chair of the Race Equality Board, my counterpart at Business in the Community was Dame Helena Morrissey, who has started the 30% Club. And I said to her at one point, why did you pick 30%? And she said, well, the evidence shows that you need to have at least 3 out of 10 of the people around any table of the diversity that you're trying to foster before we feel comfortable, right? Whether it's disability, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, LGBTQ, it doesn't, so I thought 30% is an interesting number. And so that's what I try to fixate on. But in my own team at BT, I say I place the emphasis on leadership as I think the main thing. And we now have a very strong technical team. We're continuing to grow, as many other organizations are. It's a big focus for us, AI. And about 44% of my team are women, and about 19% come from ethnic minority groups. We can't always get the data on other forms of diversity as easily. And I did a similar thing at my previous organization, I think it really is about, getting across the view that, unless we achieve these types of outcomes, that we're introducing risk. There's commercial risk, there's societal risk, there's environmental risk. There are a host of risks that we're introducing by not taking this seriously and getting the balance back. So however we achieve the balance, there is a massive imbalance, and it's been long-standing, and we haven't made any progress. And so we do need, more radical thought about how we do this.
Thank you.
But it can be done.
Yes, that's a nice positive. It can be done, and we just have to have the will and maybe somehow address some of the backlash that can occur, because it does occur. Wendy, your thoughts?
Well, I've been inspired by both Erin. It's lovely going last, actually. I've been inspired by both Erin and Adrian. And my thought, your question's a very clever one, Alison. You sent it to us early, so we had a bit of time to prepare. It's very clever. It is about semantics. But I was thinking two things. One, we in terms of other career sectors, when in my working lifetime, what's changed? I'm going to say what's changed in medicine and law. When I chose my A levels, I wanted to study medicine at university. That was my first love. That's what I wanted to do. And my headmistress, this was 1969, said, Wendy, I can hear her saying it now, Wendy, medicine is not a career for women. And she wouldn't let me take the A levels to get me into medical school. And she said, go do maths and physics, because that's, you're a natural at it and you will excel. Well, she was probably right. I hated her at the time and rebelled hugely. And those of you that know me will think, oh, she's not really a rebel, but actually I have always been. But anyway, I think I've had a very good career. But, in those days, medicine was not a career. There were very few women in career and in medicine and in law. And we've seen, now, way more. I think Southampton takes 75% of its medics are women now, and law's the same. And what has happened there? I try and think about that. Clearly, women like doing law and medicine because it's helping people. And this comes back to the culture change that Erin was talking about, is we have to make this, as Sue Black will always say, computing is sexy, it's empowering, it's cool, and you help people. We've tried to talk about, you build systems to work in hospitals and to do the caring stuff, of course, but it somehow doesn't encourage the women into that macho bit of the basement, the IT crowd basement, where the programmers sit. And of course we do attract, I have to say, people who like that sort of environment, because it works for them. So we have got to, and it's all up to all of us. It's beholden on all of us to work to change this culture as quickly. And we've got to think of some radical things, really radical. We've tried in the past. I remember working with people who were writing the scripts for EastEnders and I'm not sure, one of the other soaps, where we actually got female characters introduced. And on the Archers, I think I'm right in saying this, I think Alison went to Southampton University to study engineering, and now she's an alcoholic. That didn't work out very well. I just caught it the other day. So we've worked on those sorts of things to try and get it into sort of, but I'm going to my final point, which was really inspired by Adrian and the 30%. Actually, we can't say we're going to reduce the, we could say, right, our target is, say for women, it's 50-50, men, women, on any course that we fund or any scholarship or any, but then we would hugely lose out in terms of skills. We need as many people as possible. But of course, of the 50% of men, some of those will be from underrepresented groups. And so if you think about it like that, and that was Adrian gave me that inspiration, we could work on that for the strategy, Adrian. That's a really good idea.
On the icons, we could absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this is what this session's about, really. It's about producing sort of solutions, and your comments about sort of about quotas and setting benchmarks can be difficult, and it sort of answered a question that was posted earlier on. I think, I mean, I will just sort of agree in a way. I mean, I'll give you one example of some of my own work that I'm doing, just being cheekily taking the air for a second. I'm involved in the UK QAA subject benchmark statements for computing, and they're just revising them at the moment. And I was made the EDEI sub-lead. And essentially the original plan for that was we were going to produce a vision statement that would be sitting at the top of the thing, and that's great and that's fine and dandy, but all the other subgroups are off working on their content, and never the twain shall meet, and we just ticked the box. And so, you know, I've said, well, why shouldn't we be going in now and grid mapping all the statements as to how they meet accessibility, sustainability, and EDI, and changing the content. You know, is algorithmic bias in there? Is, you know, the importance of collaborative working? And again, going back to what Wendy said, you know, when I teach my apprentices, you know, this is about collaborative working, about changing the way that a good quality programmer who is employable has to behave and work nowadays. This basement solo programming is rare. It is a collaborative approach. So changing how it's viewed, you know, I think is quite important. And we said semantics did matter. One comment has come through. Question was from, oh, it's anonymous. Where were the first computer scientists in the 50s and 60s not women? When and why did this culture change?
I know the answer to that.
Go on then.
Read the book Programmed Inequality by Ma Hicks. It's all in there. I mean, that should be absolute. Everybody should be it was interested in diversity should have to read that book.
Yeah, and look at the film Hidden Figures as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this has been, you know, it's been chronicled how this has worked over the years.
And to summarise that book, sorry, Wendy.
No, I was going to say, I hit the computing industry in the 1980s, and you know, when actually the turning point was the PC. It came out, it was sold as toys for the boys, and that, you know, that the few women that were around at the time who wanted to apply to computer science were turned off at that point, and we've never got them back again. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, there were a lot of women. When I started in computing, there were a lot of women running IT departments in companies. But yeah, read Ma Hicks's book, Programmed Inequality, and watch Hidden Figures.
Yeah,
okay.
and just to add, I completely agree. Brilliant book. I mean, both amazing. And one of the things that we are worried about, particularly happening in the AI fields at the moment, is this kind of repeating itself. So where there began to be more kind of prestige and money and, you know, the idea of power in the computing industry as a whole, this is when men began to take dominance, and we kind of see this happening again in AI. And so I think when we're thinking about diversity and ethics of AI, in a way, we kind of want to try and rewrite this narrative of what's already happened in computing and see how we can change this before it escalates any further.
Okay.
The other thing to make,
we're very close to wrapping up, and Wendy, so I'm going to, sorry, Adrian, I'm going to let Wendy have the final word.
Fine.
Very quick. Actually, the number of women in leadership in AI is very. I mean, you've got Tabitha and Tabitha Goldstub and Sana Karigani. You've got me and many others in senior positions in policy in AI, and that's not translating into the practitioner workforce, and that worries me. You know, because we're all passionate about this, and we're not making a difference. So. We've got to watch that we don't repeat history. That's really important what Erin just said, because I think we are in danger of doing that.
And I think to sum up and to close, and I'll pick up on what Wendy's just said, you know, we need to embed this almost with not obviously into all of the system, into the AI strategy, into how we design computing courses and the curriculum, into how we design the workplace. We need to look back. I do read that book, and because it was a deliberately designed environment, and we need to redesign it for the future. I have to say thank you so much. Thank you for the people who've been posting comments. I really do appreciate that. And sorry we couldn't get through them all. And I'm going to close at that point, but with the final phrase, If it's not diverse, it is not ethical, and it is not working.